should the federal government provide a job to anybody who wants one in this country? The program, the concept of a jobs guarantee has regained new life and new momentum with a recent piece by our next guest. Economist Pavlina Tcherneva suggests that a jobs guarantee is a good idea. I tend to agree, but we wanted to talk to her about it first. Pavlina Tcherneva is Associate Professor of Economics and Director of the Economics Program at Bard College, and she has written a white paper entitled, let me get the job exactly right, the working paper is entitled The Job Guarantee, Design, Jobs, and Implementation, published by the Levy Economics Institute, and she joins us now. First of all, Pavlina, thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Secondly, I thought this paper was so concisely worded, both in its statement of the problem and in its recommended solutions. So thank you for that. Let's start off with this. Let's just to be clear, what would a job guarantee look like in this country?
A job guarantee will be an option for work, a public option for work, essentially. What would it look like is basically as a standby offer. If someone is in need of good work that pays a living wage, but they've been unable to find work in the private, public, nonprofit sector, they've been looking and looking and they still are in need of work, this will be the final option on the table. The public option for work that provides employment opportunities in the public service sector, and also assistance with transitioning out of that job guarantee when people wish to find better paid private or nonprofit sector employment.
So when you say living wage, first of all, so we're talking about the $15 minimum wage that's been proposed, I gather. And then secondly, when you talk about public service jobs, is this something, when people are trying to envision this, is this something like the WPA under Franklin D. Roosevelt? Is this jobs of, what kinds of jobs would these be?
Yeah, I mean, essentially the program is attempting to solve a couple of problems. The first one is that even in the best of times, there are millions and millions of people who wish to work. So that is problem number one. And the job guarantee aims to address this problem even when conventional opinion says that we are at full employment. Mm-hmm. There are many people who are not counted in the unemployment rate that are working odd hours or not making adequate pay. They're struggling to make ends meet. So this is really primary objective. But if we will be creating employment opportunities, we want to also address some of the other economic problems that we're facing. And in this particular context, I'm focusing specifically on the public squalor, trying to patch up the public services, trying to provision for the public good, do the sort of work that has been neglected or the private sector doesn't have an interest in doing. So the way I talk about the job guarantee is as a, if you will, a national care act. We would like to take care of our communities. We would like to take care of people. We would like to take care of the environment. So it would be inspired by the New Deal era, but it will be a program for the modern context, trying to deal with environmental challenges, trying to deal with care needs, trying to deal with the abandoned public spaces that need rehabilitation.
So if someone wanted a job under this program, if they didn't have the necessary skills, they would be trained, I assumed, in order to do the kind of work that you describe. One of the interesting points that you make in outlining the problem itself is that you make the statement that the problem is already paid for, quote unquote, because we live in a political culture where our politicians always want to talk about how a program is paid for unless it fits other emotional or political needs of their own, such as military, for example. But by and large, when it's a social program of any kind, they want to know how it's paid for. You make the comment that the cost for the social and economic ills that this program addresses have already been and are being paid for by the economy and society at large. What do you mean by that?
Yes, the current model is not a very effective model. What basically I mean by that is that we have accepted as a normal, a condition where we will have millions and millions of people without a job. Economists have termed this the natural rate of unemployment. The NAIRU is another term for it. And my position is that there is nothing natural about this condition of having millions and millions of people seeking decent, well-paid work, but being unable to find that. Why is there nothing natural about it? First, because virtually every socioeconomic problem that we see is linked in one way or another to the problem of unemployment. We talk about deaths of despair. We talk about increased mortality. And there's really very good research that has documented the increase in mortality as a consequence of unemployment. The impact that the scarring effects, the lost wages, those would be some of the obvious costs that people bear. But you see, unemployment doesn't just impact the unemployed themselves, people who wish to have economic opportunity but are just not able to latch onto the labor market and then begin their productive life in the labor market. We know that unemployment impacts their children. We know that it impacts their spouses. We know that crime has a cyclical component that is related to unemployment. So basically what I'm suggesting that we are paying in terms of the social costs, in terms of the children malnutrition, in terms of the increased costs of mental and health problems. The opioid epidemic is also related to the problem of unemployment. There are other things going on there as well. But in terms of real cost, this is a very expensive situation to tolerate mass unemployment. Recidivism rate is related to the problem of unemployment. There are good programs for ex-convicts that show that when they are helped with finding employment, the recidivism rates drop dramatically. So just as an example, the cost in the state of New York of incarcerating somebody is about $79,000. That is 2 living wage jobs. And so to me, it is far more efficient, effective, it is cheaper to simply provide the employment opportunities and to prevent the evolution of all of these large social costs that I just listed. And I should say that it's not just that. I mean, we are giving up lost output by not permitting people to participate in the economy. We are essentially giving up the social value that they can create.
And again, we're talking with economist Pavlina Tcherneva about a job guarantee, a federal job guarantee. You also make the point that using unemployment as a hedge against, or as a bulwark against inflation and as a preventative for other forms of economic instability is a moral failure on the part of the economics profession itself. The idea that you would subject millions and millions of people to this type of suffering, which manifests itself in the multiple ways you've described, that is in fact a moral failure. Is that an unusual position for an economist to take?
It probably is somewhat of an unusual position because economists don't normally talk about ethics and values. But look, we're talking about people here. When economists talk about the natural rate of unemployment, we are today looking at about 17 million missing living wage jobs. It is not an acceptable situation to say that we cannot employ those people when we actually have the means and the ability. So here's what the economic profession normally does, and that is kind of an explicit policy objective. when we say that 4.1% is full employment, we're saying essentially that the private sector cannot do better than that. The private sector is unable to create any more jobs, and so about 17 million people will be without either work or without well-paid work. Now, of course, we have other means. The private sector might not be able to provide a job for everyone, and certainly that's not the job of the private sector. It's not the firm's responsibility to guarantee employment for everyone who seeks it. But that is a public function. That is a public purpose function, because the unemployed are already, so to speak, in the public sector. The public sector is the one that addresses the fallout of unemployment. So when the Federal Reserve says, okay, the economy has reached its full employment level, it is time to perhaps step on the brakes, because if unemployment is too low, it might create inflation. What that is essentially saying that too many people have jobs and perhaps income, and that may generate some price increases. Now, to me, it's not just a moral failure to say that, we got to throw some people out of work in order to tame inflation, but it's also bad economics, because we have an alternative. We can simply do some inflation control, if you will, by giving people jobs. The job guarantee will act as a bulwark against some inflationary pressures, and it is a better approach than the current approach of using the unemployed.
And it has the advantage, to get back to the moral question, of you're not, in effect, using human beings as ballast, throwing them overboard so that the economy can stay afloat. Now, you describe the core policy objective of the job guarantee this way: to provide decent jobs at decent pay on demand to all individuals of legal working age who want to work, irrespective of labor market status, race, sex, color, or creed. And you list additional objectives: to serve the public purpose, to establish an effective minimum wage, and so on, to guarantee jobs as a preventive human right. And of course, it would I would assume it would boost all wages by tightening the labor market, right?
Yeah, the policy itself establishes a wage floor. Today we talk about the minimum wage, but the minimum wage doesn't really help people who want work and can't find minimum wage work. But the job guarantee essentially secures job opportunities for all who want them, and establishes that they will be at, as I've proposed, $15 an hour plus some basic benefits. Now, that represents an effective minimum wage, because if somebody is working at a $7.50 an hour, $8, $9 an hour, and they are unable to support their family, they would likely opt for the public option. They would probably go to the job guarantee program. And firms will be pressured, in a sense, to meet the job guarantee wage to be able to retain those employees. And this is really one desirable feature of the program, because we are essentially establishing a living wage floor for the entire economy, not just in the public sector, but also in the private sector. And essentially, we are saying this is a floor below which no one will fall.
So you've published this working paper on the topic. I think it's an extremely important contribution to the discussion. Have you seen other people, either in politics or in commentary, picking this idea up? What can people do to kind of give a boost to this idea which I consider so important?
There has been quite a bit of discussion on the job guarantee in recent months, and it's very encouraging to see people recognize its merits. I would say that, from my own senator here in New York, Gillibrand, to Representative Ro Khanna and Senator Sanders, Bernie Sanders, there's a strong interest in bold jobs programs, job guarantee specifically. There are quite a few people that are running on a job guarantee platform, and that is also encouraging. And I should say that the program, though it has only recently entered the mainstream conversation, seems to garner a lot of popular support. There was recent survey, a poll that was conducted by Data for Progress that found that Americans, the majority of Americans, support the job guarantee. And very interesting findings that in some deep red states, support for the job guarantee approaches 70+% of the polled respondents. So I think that people feel that the economy is not quite working, and this improvement in the labor market is not really the sort of thing that they expect for themselves and their families. If they want to have a job, they realize they would like to have stable and good work. And so the job guarantee essentially provides that additional support for the economy that ensures that we will create pro-employment growth, and that we will make jobless recoveries basically a thing of the past.
Well, I think it's a terrific idea, as I've said, and so thank you for writing this working paper, Pavlina Tcherneva, head of the economics program at Bard College, and thank you for coming on the program.
My pleasure.